The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of Clarence's house as Camilla sat at her mahogany desk, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the cream-colored envelope. The royal seal had already been broken, and the letter inside felt heavier than any piece of paper had the right to feel. She had read it 3 times now, each reading making the words more real, more devastating. The letter was from Catherine, the Princess of Wales, written in her careful, elegant handwriting. But the words themselves were anything but elegant. They were raw, honest, and cut straight through the carefully maintained facade that had held the royal family together for so many years. Your Majesty. It began, though Camilla knew Kate meant it with bitter irony. I can no longer remain silent about what I witnessed last Thursday evening. The way you spoke to my children, the way you dismissed their feelings, the way you made Charlotte cry. It stops now. Camilla's breath caught in her throat as she remembered that evening. It had been a private family dinner at Windsor, nothing formal, just the immediate family gathering for what should have been a pleasant meal. But tensions had been running high lately. Charles had been increasingly frustrated with the press coverage of their family dynamics, and Camilla had been feeling the pressure of constantly being compared to Diana, even after all these years. The children had been excited, chattering about their school projects and upcoming events. Charlotte had been particularly animated, talking about her art project on butterflies. But when she had accidentally knocked over her water glass, sending water cascading across the antique tablecloth, Camilla had snapped. "For heaven's sake, Charlotte, can't you sit properly for one meal?" Your grandmother would have been appalled by such behavior. The silence that followed had been deafening. Charlotte's face had crumpled, and tears had begun to flow down her cheeks. William had immediately reached for his daughter, pulling her close, while Kate had simply stared at Camilla with a look that could have frozen fire. "That's enough," Kate had said quietly, but her voice carried a warning that everyone at the table understood. She had excused herself and the children, leaving the adults to finish their meal in uncomfortable silence. Now, reading Kate's letter, Camilla could see how that moment had been the final straw in what had clearly been a series of grievances that Kate had been storing up. The letter detailed other incidents, times when Camilla had made cutting remarks about Kate's background, subtle digs about her family's lack of royal breeding, comments about how Diana would have handled various situations. "You seem to forget," the letter continued, "that while you may be queen consort now, you are not these children's grandmother. You are not their family by blood, and you certainly don't have the right to speak to them the way you did. Your bitterness about the past should not be taken out on innocent children who had nothing to do with the choices you and Charles made 25 years ago." Camilla set the letter down and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where gardeners were tending to the late autumn roses. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was surrounded by beauty and privilege, yet she felt more isolated than ever. She had worked so hard to earn acceptance, to prove herself worthy of Charles's love and the crown that now sat upon her head. But in moments like these, she wondered if it had all been worth it. The truth was, she had been struggling with her role as stepmother and now step-grandmother. It wasn't a natural fit for her, and she knew it. She had married Charles when William and Harry were already adults, and she had never really had to navigate the complexities of being a maternal figure to them. But now, with William's children, she was expected to slip seamlessly into the role of loving grandmother, and it didn't feel authentic to her. Her own children, Tom and Laura, had been understanding but distant. They had their own lives, their own families, and while they supported her relationship with her stepfather, there was always an underlying tension about the public nature of their lives now. They had grown up in relative privacy, and suddenly, finding themselves adjacent to the royal family had been an adjustment for everyone. But Kate's children were different. They were born into this life, and they deserved to feel loved and accepted by everyone in their extended family. Camilla knew this intellectually, but emotionally, she struggled with feelings of inadequacy and resentment that she couldn't seem to shake. The letter went on to describe Kate's perspective on their relationship over the years, how she had tried to be respectful and deferential, understanding the complexities of Camilla's position, how she had defended Camilla to friends and family members who still held grudges about the way she had entered Charles's life, how she had encouraged William to give Camilla a chance and had worked to create opportunities for bonding. "But I'm done making excuses for you," Kate wrote. "I'm done pretending that your behavior is acceptable just because you're married to the king. My children deserve better. They deserve to feel safe and loved in their grandfather's home. And if you can't provide that, then perhaps you should reconsider your involvement in family gatherings." The words hit Camilla like a physical blow. She had always prided herself on her resilience, her ability to weather storms and criticism. But this wasn't coming from the press or from strangers who had never met her. This was coming from Catherine, the future queen, the mother of the future king. This was coming from someone who had every reason to want family harmony and who had clearly reached her breaking point. Camilla thought about Charles and how this would affect him. He adored his grandchildren and took such joy in their visits. Family meals were some of his happiest moments, watching the children play and seeing the family he had always dreamed of finally coming together. If Kate followed through on her implied threat to limit their interactions, it would break his heart. But more than that, Camilla realized that Kate was right. She had crossed a line. Her own pain and insecurities had led her to lash out at a child, and that was unforgivable. Charlotte was only 8 years old, bright and spirited and full of life. She didn't deserve to bear the brunt of adult complications and old wounds. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Charles, calling from his office at Buckingham Palace. "Darling, I've just spoken to William. He says Kate is quite upset about something that happened at dinner last week. Do you know what he's referring to?" Camilla closed her eyes, knowing that the reckoning she had been dreading was finally at hand. "Yes, Charles. I think we need to talk." "Of course. I'll be home within the hour. Is everything all right?" "No," she said quietly. "Everything is not all right." After hanging up, Camilla returned to the letter, reading the final paragraph that had shaken her to her core. "I have always respected your position and your relationship with Charles. I have tried to understand the impossible situation you were placed in and the criticism you have faced. But I will not allow my children to become collateral damage in your ongoing struggle with your own demons. You need to decide who you want to be in this family, a source of love and support or a reminder of past pain. You cannot be both." The letter was signed simply Catherine, but there was a postscript that made Camilla's heart sink even further. "I have not shared this letter with William, though I suspect he knows I'm writing to you. I'm giving you the opportunity to address this privately before it becomes a larger family issue. Please don't make me regret extending this courtesy." Camilla walked to her desk drawer and pulled out a piece of paper. She began to write her own letter, an apology, an explanation, a plea for forgiveness. But after several attempts, she crumpled each draft and threw it away. Words seemed inadequate for the damage she had done. She heard Charles's car pulling up the drive and knew that their conversation would determine not just her relationship with Kate and the children, but possibly her future role in the royal family itself. She had fought so hard to earn her place, and now she might lose it all because she couldn't control her own pain and jealousy. The front door opened, and she heard Charles's familiar footsteps on the marble floor. She quickly folded Kate's letter and slipped it into her desk drawer. She would tell him about it, but first she needed to find the right words, the right way to explain how everything had gone so terribly wrong. "Camilla," Charles called out, his voice carrying the concern that had been evident during their phone call. "In here, darling," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. As Charles entered the room, Camilla looked at the man she loved, the man she had waited so many years to marry, and wondered if her inability to be the person his family needed might cost her everything she had worked so hard to achieve. The letter in her drawer felt like a ticking bomb, and she knew that whatever happened next would change their family forever. Charles entered the drawing room with the measured steps of a man who had spent decades navigating delicate family situations, but Camilla could see the worry etched in the lines around his eyes. He had loosened his tie and removed his jacket, signs that he intended this to be more than a brief conversation. William seemed quite distressed, Charles said, settling into the leather armchair across from where Camilla stood by the window. He mentioned that Kate has been upset since Thursday evening, but he wouldn't elaborate. Said it was something Kate needed to discuss with you directly. Camilla turned from the window, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. The afternoon light caught the diamonds in her wedding ring, sending small rainbows across the wall, a touch of beauty in what felt like an increasingly dark moment. "She's written to me," Camilla said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Charles straightened in his chair. "Written to you? About what?" Camilla moved to her desk and retrieved Kate's letter, her hands trembling slightly as she held it out to her husband. "Perhaps you should read it yourself." Charles took the letter and unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the elegant handwriting that he had seen on countless thank-you notes and Christmas cards over the years. As he read, Camilla watched his expression change from confusion to concern to something that looked very much like disappointment. When he finished, Charles set the letter down on the small table between their chairs and looked at his wife with an expression she had rarely seen from him, one of profound sadness mixed with a kind of weary resignation. "Tell me what happened, Camilla. Tell me exactly what happened that evening." So she did. She told him about the spilled water glass, about her sharp words to Charlotte, about the silence that followed, and the way Kate had gathered her children and left the room. But as she spoke, she found herself trying to explain not just what had happened, but why it had happened. "I don't know what came over me, Charles. It was as if all the frustration and pressure of the past months just erupted. The constant comparisons to Diana, the feeling that no matter what I do, I'll never be good enough for this family, the way the press scrutinizes every interaction I have with the children." Charles held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Camilla, you made a child cry at our dinner table. An 8-year-old child who adores her grandfather and should feel safe and loved in his home. Whatever pressures you're feeling, they don't justify that." The words stung because they were true, but also because they came from Charles, the man who had always been her defender, her protector against the slings and arrows of public opinion and family disapproval. "I know that," she said, sinking into the chair opposite him. "I know I was wrong. But, Charles, you have to understand how difficult this has been for me. I'm constantly walking on eggshells, trying to be the perfect stepmother, the perfect grandmother, the perfect queen consort. And I'm failing at all of it." Charles leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. "Darling, no one expects you to be perfect. But we do expect you to be kind, especially to children. Like Diana was," Camilla said bitterly, the words escaping before she could stop them. The silence that followed was profound and painful. Charles's face went pale, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a coldness that Camilla had never heard directed at her. "Diana has been dead for 26 years, Camilla. 26 years. And you're still competing with a ghost. When will it be enough? When will you accept that you won? You married me. You became queen consort. You have a life you wanted. Why can't you simply live it without constantly looking over your shoulder at someone who can no longer hurt you?" Tears began to stream down Camilla's face, but Charles continued, his voice growing more passionate. "Do you know what William said to me today? He said he's worried about bringing his children here anymore. He said Kate is questioning whether it's healthy for them to be around someone who seems to resent their very existence. Is that really what you want, Camilla? To drive away the only grandchildren I'll ever have because you can't let go of ghosts?" "That's not fair," Camilla protested. "I don't resent them. I love them. I don't know how to love them the way everyone expects me to." "Then learn," Charles said simply. "Because Kate is right. This stops now." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the conversation settling between them like a heavy curtain. Outside, Camilla could hear the sound of traffic on the distant street, the normal sounds of life continuing while her world felt like it was falling apart. "What do you think I should do?" she asked finally. "I think you should call Kate and ask if you can come see her. I think you should apologize properly, not just for what happened Thursday evening, but for all of it. And I think you should mean it. And if she won't see me?" Charles's expression softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "Then we'll have to deal with that when it happens. But, Camilla, you have to try. Not just for Kate's sake or for the children's sake, but for your own. You can't continue to live your life poisoned by resentment and jealousy. It's destroying you, and it's destroying our family." That evening, Camilla sat alone in her study, staring at the phone. She had written and rewritten her apology letter a dozen times, but each attempt felt inadequate. How do you apologize for years of subtle hostility and resentment? How do you explain to someone that you've been so consumed by your own insecurities that you've lost sight of basic human decency? She thought about the children, George with his serious demeanor and love of airplanes, Charlotte with her artistic spirit and infectious laugh, and little Louis with his mischievous grin and boundless energy. They had never done anything to deserve her coldness. They were innocent of the complicated history that had shaped their family before they were even born. Finally, she picked up the phone and dialed Kate's number. It rang several times before Kate's voice came through, cautious and formal. "Hello, Camilla." "Catherine," Camilla said, using Kate's full name as a sign of respect. "I've read your letter. Could we meet? I think there are things I need to say to you in person." There was a long pause, and Camilla could almost hear Kate weighing her options. "I suppose that would be appropriate," Kate said finally. "Tomorrow afternoon? At Kensington Palace?" "Yes, that would be perfect." "Catherine." "Yes. Thank you for giving me this chance." After hanging up, Camilla felt both relief and terror. She had one opportunity to make this right, and she knew that Kate would not extend such courtesy again if she failed. The next morning brought rain, matching Camilla's mood as she prepared for what might be the most important conversation of her reign as queen consort. She chose her outfit carefully, nothing too formal that might suggest she was hiding behind her royal status, but nothing too casual that might imply she didn't take the meeting seriously. As her car pulled up to Kensington Palace, Camilla felt her heart racing. She had been here countless times before for family gatherings and official events, but this felt different. This felt like a reckoning. Kate met her at the door herself, rather than having staff show her in. She was dressed simply in a navy sweater and dark jeans, her hair pulled back in a low ponytail. She looked tired, Camilla noticed, and there were faint circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "Thank you for coming," Kate said, her voice polite but guarded. They walked to Kate's private sitting room, a comfortable space decorated in soft blues and greens with family photos covering every surface. Camilla couldn't help but notice the absence of any photos that included her. They sat across from each other, the coffee table between them feeling like a vast chasm. Kate had prepared tea, a gesture that Camilla recognized as both hospitable and deeply English. Even in conflict, certain civil ties must be maintained. "I want to apologize," Camilla began, but Kate held up a hand. "Before you say anything, I want you to understand something. This isn't about one evening or one comment to Charlotte. This is about years of small cruelties, subtle undermining, and the feeling that you see me and my children as obstacles to be tolerated rather than family members to be loved." Kate's voice was steady, but Camilla could see the emotion in her eyes. "I have tried so hard to understand your position, to be patient with your adjustment to this role. I have made excuses for you to William when he's noticed your coldness toward our children. I have bitten my tongue when you've made comments about my family or my background. But I cannot and will not allow you to make my children feel unwelcome in their own grandfather's home." Camilla felt the weight of Kate's words settling over her like a heavy blanket. She had thought she was being subtle, that her feelings weren't obvious. But clearly, she had been fooling no one but herself. "You're right," Camilla said quietly. "About all of it. And I'm sorry. Not because I've been caught, but because I've been wrong. So very, very wrong. Kate studied Camilla's face for a long moment, searching for sincerity behind the carefully composed mask that had become second nature to them both in their royal roles. The afternoon light streaming through the tall windows of Kensington Palace cast shadows across the room, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that seemed fitting for such a pivotal moment. "I need you to understand what it's like for me," Kate said, her voice growing stronger as she found her footing in this unprecedented conversation. "I married into this family knowing it would be complicated. I knew about Diana, about the history, about the way the public would always compare me to her. But I thought that within the family, things would be different. I thought we could all move forward together." Camilla nodded, not trusting herself to speak yet. She could see the pain in Kate's eyes, the weight of years of silent endurance. "When William and I first got engaged, I was terrified of meeting you," Kate continued. "Not because of who you were, but because of what you represented. You were this larger-than-life figure who had somehow survived one of the biggest scandals in royal history. I actually admired that in a way. I thought it meant you were strong, resilient. I thought maybe you could teach me how to navigate this world." Kate paused to pour herself more tea, her hands steady despite the emotion in her voice. "Do you know what our first real conversation was about? It was at Charles's 60th birthday party. You came up to me and said, 'Well, I suppose you think you've got it all figured out now.' I didn't know how to respond to that. I was 26 years old, completely overwhelmed by the attention and the protocol and the pressure, and the woman who should have been my ally seemed to see me as a threat." Camilla felt a flush of shame as the memory came flooding back. She remembered that conversation differently. She had thought she was being welcoming, making light conversation. But hearing it through Kate's perspective, she could see how her words might have sounded bitter, challenging. "I spent years trying to prove myself to you," Kate continued. "I invited you to private family events. I asked your advice about royal protocol. I defended your relationship with Charles to friends who questioned it. I even asked you to help me choose my wedding dress designer, hoping it might bring us closer together." "I remember that," Camilla said softly. "I thought you were just being polite." "I was being hopeful," Kate corrected. "I wanted us to be family. Real family. Not just people who appear together at state occasions and smile for the cameras." Kate stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where her children often played. "When George was born, I invited you to be one of the first people to meet him. I thought becoming a grandmother might soften you somehow. But even then, even holding my newborn son, you made a comment about how Diana would have been so much better at this than you could ever be." Camilla's breath caught in her throat. She remembered that day clearly. The overwhelming emotion of holding her stepson's first child, the unexpected surge of love she had felt, immediately followed by the familiar stab of inadequacy that seemed to follow her everywhere. "I didn't realize you heard that," Camilla whispered. "I hear everything," Kate said, turning back to face her. "I hear the way you talk about my parents, the subtle digs about their business success, as if being successful outside of aristocracy is somehow shameful. I hear the way you dismiss my opinions in family discussions, as if my perspective doesn't matter because I wasn't born into this world. I hear the way you talk to the children, not with warmth or love, but with a kind of distant tolerance." Kate returned to her seat, her posture straight and determined. "But what hurt the most was realizing that you see my children as reminders of what you lost, rather than celebrating what this family gained. George, Charlotte, and Louis are not symbols of your failure to give Charles children who will inherit the throne. They are beautiful, innocent children who deserve to feel loved and welcomed by their step-grandmother." Camilla felt tears building in her eyes, but she forced herself to maintain eye contact with Kate. "You're absolutely right. About all of it. And I don't know how to explain to you why I behave this way, except to say that I've been living in a prison of my own, making for so long that I forgot how to be free." "What do you mean by that?" Kate asked, her voice gentle but still guarded. Camilla took a deep breath, knowing that what she was about to share would make her vulnerable in a way she had never been before with Kate. "When Charles and I finally married, I thought the hardest part was over. I thought that once we were officially together, once I was accepted into the royal family, the constant feeling of being an outsider would go away. But it never did. Every public appearance, every family gathering, every interaction with the press or the public, I felt like I was being judged against a standard I could never meet. Camilla's voice grew stronger as she continued, as if speaking these truths aloud was liberating something that had been trapped inside her for years. Diana was beloved in a way that I knew I never would be. She was young, beautiful, and tragic. She was the wronged woman, the devoted mother, the people's princess. I was the other woman, the homewrecker, the villain in their fairy tale. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I would always be the woman who came between Charles and his first wife. Kate listened intently, her expression softening slightly as she began to understand the depths of Camilla's insecurity. So I built walls, Camilla continued. I told myself that I didn't need anyone's approval, that I was strong enough to face their criticism alone. But somewhere along the way, those walls became so high that they kept out not just the criticism, but also the love. They kept out the possibility of real relationships, real connections with people who might have cared about me if I had let them. Including me, Kate said quietly. Especially you, Camilla agreed, because you represented everything I was afraid of. You were young and beautiful and beloved by the public. You were natural with the children, graceful at public events, beloved by Charles and William. You were everything I felt I wasn't. And instead of celebrating that, instead of being grateful that this family had found such a wonderful addition, I saw you as proof of my own inadequacy. Kate was quiet for a long moment, processing what Camilla had shared. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but still firm. I understand why you felt that way. I can even forgive the way you treated me, because I'm an adult and I chose this life. But, Camilla, the children didn't choose this. They were born into this family, and they deserve to feel safe and loved in it. When you lash out at Charlotte for spilling water, when you make comments about how Diana would have handled things better, when you treat them like inconveniences rather than treasures, you're not just hurting them. You're damaging their relationship with their grandfather, and you're creating fractures in this family that may never heal. Camilla felt the full weight of Kate's words settling over her. For the first time, she truly understood the damage her behavior had caused, not just to Kate, but to the entire family dynamic. I want to change, Camilla said, her voice breaking slightly. I want to be better. But Catherine, I don't know how. I've been bitter and defensive for so long that I don't remember how to be anything else. Kate was quiet for a moment, then asked, do you love them? Really love them? Not as symbols or reminders or obligations, but as the individual, wonderful children they are. Camilla thought about George's serious questions about history and his grandfather's work, Charlotte's artistic creations that she proudly showed to anyone who would look, Louis's infectious giggle that could light up a room. Despite her own emotional barriers, she realized that she did love them. She had just been too afraid to show it. Yes, she said simply. I do love them. Then, that's where we start, Kate said. Love them openly, without reservation, without comparing yourself to anyone else. Love them the way Camilla loves them, not the way you think Queen Consort should love them, or the way Diana might have loved them. Just love them as yourself. The simplicity of Kate's words hit Camilla like a revelation. She had been so focused on playing a role, on being the perfect royal stepmother, that she had forgotten to simply be human. There's something else, Kate said, reaching into a drawer of the side table and pulling out a folded piece of paper. Charlotte drew this yesterday. She wanted me to give it to you. Camilla took the paper and unfolded it carefully. It was a child's drawing of the royal family, done in bright crayons. There was Charles in the center, wearing a crown, surrounded by William, Kate, and the 3 children. And there, standing next to Charles, was a figure in a blue dress with a small crown. Written in Charlotte's careful 8-year-old handwriting beneath the figure were the words Granny Camilla. Tears spilled down Camilla's cheeks as she stared at the drawing. Despite everything, despite her coldness and her harsh words, Charlotte still saw her as family, still wanted to include her in their world. "She asked me why you seemed sad all the time," Kate said softly. "She said she wanted to draw you a picture to make you feel better. That's who your step-granddaughter is, Camilla. That's the child you made cry at the dinner table." Camilla clutched the drawing to her chest, overwhelmed by the simple kindness of the gesture and the magnitude of what she had almost destroyed through her own fears and insecurities. The next few weeks passed slowly, with Camilla carrying Charlotte's drawing everywhere she went. It lived in her handbag during official engagements, sat on her bedside table at night, and traveled with her to Balmoral when Charles had to attend to matters there. The simple crayon masterpiece had become both a reminder of her failure and a symbol of hope for redemption. Charles had been watching his wife carefully since their conversation following Kate's letter. He could see the change in her, subtle but real. She was quieter, more thoughtful, and seemed to be wrestling with something deep within herself. When she asked if she could arrange a private meeting with each of the children individually, he was both surprised and proud. "I want to apologize to them properly," she explained as they walked through the gardens at Highgrove. "And I want to understand who they really are, not who I've imagined them to be." The first meeting was with George, arranged for a Saturday afternoon at Kensington Palace. At 10 years old, he was serious and thoughtful, much like his father had been at that age. Camilla arrived with a carefully wrapped gift, a book about the history of British aviation that she had selected after remembering his fascination with airplanes. George received her politely but with noticeable reserve. They sat in the palace library, surrounded by thousands of books that seemed to dwarf the small boy, yet he appeared perfectly comfortable in the scholarly atmosphere. "Your father tells me you're interested in flying," Camilla said, offering him the gift. George accepted it with a formal thank you and examined the cover carefully. "Yes, ma'am. Grandpapa is teaching me about the different aircraft the RAF uses." "Please, George," Camilla said gently, "call me Camilla, or Granny Camilla, if you prefer. Ma'am, makes me feel terribly old and stuffy." A small smile played at the corners of George's mouth. "Father says I should always use proper forms of address with senior royals." "Your father is quite right about protocol," Camilla agreed. "But sometimes within family, we could be a bit more relaxed. What would feel comfortable for you?" George considered this seriously, as he seemed to consider everything. "I think, Granny Camilla, if that's all right." "That's perfectly all right," Camilla said, feeling an unexpected warmth at hearing the title spoken without irony or obligation. They spent an hour together, looking through the aviation book and discussing George's lessons with his grandfather. Camilla was struck by his intelligence and curiosity, but also by his kindness. When she accidentally mispronounced the name of an aircraft, he corrected her gently, without making her feel foolish. As their visit was ending, George surprised her by asking, "Granny Camilla, do you not like us very much?" The directness of the question took her breath away. "Whatever makes you ask that, George? You always seem sad when we're around. And you never ask us about school or our friends like Granny Diana did before she died." He paused, then added with the brutal honesty of childhood, "Mama tries to hide it, but I can tell it make her upset." Camilla felt her heart breaking at the wisdom in this young boy's eyes. "I'm so sorry you felt that way, George. It's not that I don't like you. I think I was just so worried about doing everything wrong that I forgot to do anything right." George nodded, as if this made perfect sense to him. "Father says sometimes adults make things more complicated than they need to be." "Your father is a very wise man," Camilla said. "George, would you give me another chance? To be a proper granny to you?" "Yes," he said simply. "I'd like that." The meeting with Charlotte was scheduled for the following week, and Camilla approached it with even more trepidation. Charlotte was the child she had spoken harshly to, the one whose tears haunted her dreams. But when Charlotte bounded into the room where they were to meet, her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Granny Camilla, did you like my drawing? I loved it so much that I carry it with me everywhere," Camilla said, pulling the carefully preserved artwork from her bag. It's one of the most beautiful gifts anyone has ever given me. Charlotte beamed with pride. I wanted to draw the whole family together because that's what we are, right? A family. The simplicity and warmth of Charlotte's worldview humbled Camilla completely. Here was a child who, despite being made to cry at a family dinner, still saw Camilla as part of their family, still wanted to include her in their world. I owe you an apology, Charlotte, Camilla said, kneeling down to be at the child's eye level. The way I spoke to you at dinner was wrong. You were just being a normal, excited little girl, and I was unkind to you. I am sorry. Charlotte considered this with the seriousness that children reserve for important conversations. It's okay, Granny Camilla. Mama says sometimes grown-ups have bad days too. Your mama is very wise and very kind, Camilla said. But it's not okay for adults to take their bad days out on children. That's something I need to remember. They spent their time together looking at Charlotte's art collection, drawings, paintings, and crafts that filled several boxes in her room. Charlotte explained each piece with the enthusiasm of a museum curator, and Camilla found herself genuinely enchanted by the child's creativity and imagination. This one is you and Grandpapa on your wedding day, Charlotte said, showing her a drawing done in pastels. I wasn't born yet, but Mama showed me pictures. In the drawing, Camilla and Charles stood together under a rainbow, both wearing crowns and enormous smiles. It was a child's interpretation of love and happiness, free from the complexities and controversies that adults insisted on attaching to everything. It's beautiful, Charlotte. You've made us both look very happy. Were you happy on your wedding day? Charlotte asked with genuine curiosity. Very happy, Camilla said honestly. It was one of the best days of my life. Good, Charlotte said with satisfaction. I like it when people are happy. The meeting with Louis, at 6 years old, was the most challenging simply because of his energy and natural exuberance. He had no memory of Camilla being anything other than part of his family, and he approached her with the open affection that he showed to everyone he loved. Granny Camilla, do you want to see my Lego castle? He asked before she had even taken off her coat. She spent 2 hours on the floor of his playroom, helping him build elaborate structures and listening to his constant chatter about school, his friends, his latest obsessions. Louis had inherited his mother's warmth and his father's sense of humor, and Camilla found herself laughing more than she had in months. You're really good at building castles, Louis announced as they admired their handiwork. Maybe you could help me build one for Mama's birthday. I would love that, Camilla said, meaning it completely. As she was leaving, Louis surprised her by wrapping his small arms around her legs in an enthusiastic hug. I'm glad you're my granny, he said simply. The words hit Camilla with unexpected force. This little boy, who had never known a world without her in it, simply accepted her as family with no reservations or conditions. It was a kind of unconditional love that she had forgotten existed. After meeting with each of the children individually, Camilla felt as though she was seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't reminders of what she lacked or symbols of someone else's legacy. They were George, Charlotte, and Louis, unique individuals with their own personalities, interests, and gifts. But the real test came the following month when Charles suggested a family weekend at Sandringham. It would be the first time the entire family had been together since the incident that had prompted Kate's letter, and everyone was nervous about how the dynamics would play out. Camilla spent weeks preparing, not just logistically, but emotionally. She planned activities that each child would enjoy, researched topics she could discuss with them, and, most importantly, she practiced simply being present with them rather than performing the role of stepmother. When the family arrived at Sandringham on Friday evening, the tension was palpable. William and Kate were polite, but watchful. The children were unusually subdued, and Charles was clearly anxious about whether his family could find a way to heal. Dinner that first evening was carefully orchestrated, informal, but with enough structure to prevent any accidental chaos. Camilla had specifically requested that they use everyday dishes rather than the formal china, hoping to create a more relaxed atmosphere. As the meal progressed, she found herself actually listening to the children's stories about school and friends, asking follow-up questions, and sharing appropriate anecdotes from her own life. When Charlotte accidentally knocked over the salt shaker, Camilla simply smiled and helped her clean it up, making a joke about how the dining room needed more excitement anyway. The breakthrough came on Saturday afternoon when Camilla suggested they all work together to create a family portrait using Charlotte's art supplies. It was Lewis who insisted that she sit between Charles and Charlotte in the drawing, positioning her firmly within the family circle. As they worked on their masterpiece, with paint-covered hands and genuine laughter filling the room, Camilla realized that Kate had been right. Love wasn't about competing with the past or proving herself worthy of her position. It was simply about being present, being kind, and being genuine. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Kate found Camilla in the library, reading by the fireplace. "Thank you," Kate said simply, settling into the chair beside her. "For what?" "For trying. For changing. For loving them the way they deserve to be loved." Camilla closed her book and looked at Kate, seeing her not as a rival or a threat, but as a woman who loved her family fiercely and wanted the best for them. "Thank you for giving me the chance," Camilla replied, "and for loving them so well that they could forgive me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the fire and listening to the sounds of the old house settling around them. It felt, for the first time, like they were truly family. 6 months had passed since that transformative weekend at Sandringham, and the change in family dynamics was remarkable to anyone who knew them well. Camilla had kept every promise she made to herself and to Kate, approaching her role as step-grandmother with a newfound authenticity that surprised even Charles. The morning light filtered through the windows of Clarence's house as Camilla sat at the same mahogany desk where she had first read Kate's devastating letter. But today, instead of holding words of accusation and disappointment, she was looking at a collection of artwork, school reports, and photographs that chronicled the past months of building genuine relationships with her step-grandchildren. There was George's latest essay about British military history, which he had specifically asked her to read because he valued her perspective. There was a painting from Charlotte showing the entire family at their recent Christmas celebration, with Camilla prominently featured wearing the brooch that Charlotte had helped her choose for the occasion. And there was a series of photographs from Lewis's 6th birthday party, where Camilla could be seen genuinely laughing as he covered her face with cake frosting. Charles entered the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee, a morning routine they had maintained for years, but which now felt different somehow. Warmer, more connected. "William called this morning," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "He wanted to thank you for the book you sent George about naval aviation. Apparently, he's been reading passages aloud to anyone who will listen." Camilla smiled, remembering how carefully she had chosen that particular book. "He's so hungry for knowledge about everything. It reminds me of you at that age, actually." Kate also mentioned that Charlotte has been asking when she can visit you again to work on her art project for school. "I told her she could come anytime," Camilla said. "I've actually been looking forward to it. She has such an interesting perspective on color and composition." Charles studied his wife's face, noting the genuine warmth in her expression when she spoke about the children. The transformation had been gradual but profound, and he could see that it went far deeper than simply changing her behavior. Something fundamental had shifted in Camilla's understanding of herself and her place in their family. "There's something else," Charles said, his tone becoming more serious. "The palace has received a request from a documentary team. They want to do a piece about our family dynamics, particularly focusing on how blended families work within the monarchy." Camilla felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Media attention always made her nervous, especially when it touched on sensitive family matters. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we should consider it," Charles said carefully. "Not because we need to prove anything to the public, but because I think we have something positive to share. The way this family has grown and healed over the past months, it might help other families going through similar challenges." Before Camilla could respond, there was a commotion in the hallway outside, followed by the sound of children's voices. They could hear Kate apologizing to the staff for the unexpected visit, but Charles was already on his feet, heading toward the door with obvious delight. "Surprise!" Charlotte called out as she bounded into the room, followed more sedately by George and Louis, with Kate bringing up the rear, looking slightly frazzled. "We were in the neighborhood for Louis's dental appointment," Kate explained, "and the children insisted on stopping by to show Camilla their school projects. We brought you presents," Louis announced, clutching a small wrap package. Camilla felt her heart swell as she knelt down to Louis's level. "Presents? It's not my birthday or Christmas. What's the occasion?" "Charlotte said we should bring you something because you always have special things for us when we visit," George explained with his characteristic seriousness. "But more importantly," Charlotte added, "we wanted to show you our family tree project from school." Kate helped the children spread out a large poster board on Camilla's desk. It was an intricate family tree that included not just the immediate royal family, but also Kate's parents, Camilla's children Tom and Laura, and various other relatives and connections. "Look," Charlotte said, pointing to a section of the tree where Camilla's name was written in careful lettering. "I put you right here, connected to Grandpapa, but also connected to us through love lines." "Love lines?" Camilla asked, touched by the concept. "Those are the red lines," George explained. "Miss Peterson said family trees usually just show blood relationships, but Charlotte insisted on adding love relationships too, because she said some of the most important family connections aren't about being born related." Camilla traced one of the red lines with her finger, seeing how Charlotte had connected her to each of the children with these love lines that she had invented. It was a child's solution to the complexities of modern family structures, and it was perfect in its simplicity. "This is beautiful," Camilla said, meaning it completely. "May I keep this?" "Of course," Charlotte said. "We made it for you." Louis stepped forward with his wrapped package. "And this is from me. I made it in art class." Camilla carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a small clay figure that was clearly meant to be her, complete with a tiny painted crown and a smile. It was lopsided and imperfect and absolutely precious. "I love it, Louis. Thank you so much." As the children chattered about their school projects and upcoming events, Camilla found herself genuinely engaged in their stories, asking questions and sharing her own experiences. When George mentioned his upcoming role in the school play, she automatically offered to attend if parents were allowed to come. "You'd really want to come?" George asked, his surprise evident. "I would be honored to come," Camilla assured him. Kate watched these interactions with a mixture of satisfaction and relief. The change in Camilla had been gradual but consistent, and, more importantly, it felt genuine. The children responded to authenticity, and they had clearly embraced this new version of their step-grandmother. After the children had explored the house and gardens with Charles, Kate found a moment alone with Camilla in the drawing room. "I wanted you to know," Kate said, "that I've been thinking about that documentary request Charles mentioned. I think it could be a wonderful opportunity to show people that families can heal, that relationships can change and grow." Camilla was surprised by Kate's support. "You really think so?" "I do. But more than that, I think you should consider writing about your experience. Your journey from where you were to where you are now. Not for the public necessarily, but for other women who might be struggling with similar feelings of inadequacy or resentment in their family relationships." "I'm not sure anyone would want to read about my mistakes," Camilla said. "I think you'd be surprised. The courage to admit when you're wrong and then actually change, that's not something everyone has. It's something worth sharing." That evening, after the family had left and the house had returned to its usual quiet, Camilla sat down at her desk with a blank sheet of paper. She began to write, not about royal protocol or official duties, but about the journey from resentment to love, from fear to acceptance, from performing a role to living authentically. She wrote about the prison of her own making that Kate had helped her recognize. She wrote about the moment she realized that her step-grandchildren were not threats to her position, but gifts to her life. She wrote about the simple act of getting down on the floor to build Lego castles and how it had taught her more about love than years of official training. As she wrote, Camilla thought about Kate's original letter, the one that had started this entire transformation. She had kept it, not as a reminder of her failure, but as a testament to the power of honest communication and the possibility of change. The letter had said, "You need to decide who you want to be in this family, a source of love and support, or a reminder of past pain. You cannot be both." Looking back now, Camilla realized that Kate had been offering her a choice, not issuing an ultimatum. And for the first time in her life, she had chosen love over fear, authenticity over performance, connection over self-protection. The documentary, when it was eventually made, would show a family that had learned to blend tradition with modernity, duty with love, public service with private happiness. It would show children who felt secure and loved by all the adults in their lives, and adults who had learned that family is not just about blood or titles, but about the choice to show up for each other consistently and authentically. But perhaps the most powerful moment in the documentary would be a simple scene of Camilla reading bedtime stories to her step-grandchildren during a sleepover at Clarence's house. Charlotte would be curled up on one side of her, Louis on the other, with George sitting nearby, all of them completely relaxed and content. "Granny Camilla," Charlotte would say sleepily as the story ended, "I'm glad you decided to love us." "I'm glad too, sweetheart," Camilla would respond, kissing the top of Charlotte's head. "I'm glad too." The camera would capture the genuine emotion in Camilla's eyes, the peace that had replaced the tension that once defined her interactions with the children. It would show a woman who had finally learned that love is not a competition, that there is room in a child's heart for many different kinds of love, and that sometimes the most precious relationships are the ones we choose to build rather than the ones we inherit. As Camilla finished writing that first night, she realized that Kate's letter had been one of the greatest gifts she had ever received. It had forced her to confront truths about herself that she had been avoiding, but it had also offered her a path to redemption and genuine happiness. She folded the pages carefully and placed them in the same drawer where Kate's original letter still resided. Someday, perhaps, these writings would become a book that might help other families navigate similar challenges. But for now, they were simply a record of a journey from darkness to light, from isolation to belonging, from performing love to actually living it. The next morning, Camilla would call Kate to thank her again, not just for the opportunity to change, but for having the courage to demand that change in the first place. And Kate, in her gracious way, would simply say, "That's what family does for each other. We help each other become the best versions of ourselves." The transformation was complete, but the relationship would continue to grow and deepen over the years to come. Because real love, Camilla had learned, isn't a destination you reach, but a practice you commit to day after day, choice after choice, moment after moment.